911 operators of Reddit. What call will you simply never forget? Not me, but my sister is a dispatcher. One time she received a call from a man who said he just killed his sister and brother. She kept him on the phone for 5 or 6 minutes to make sure he didn't run before officers arrived. She got him to admit they had all been drinking and playing cards, then got into an argument when one of them accused the other of cheating. The other two went to bed, but this guy stayed up stewing. Apparently he couldn't let it go. He shot each of them in their beds while they slept, then called 911. I heard a partial recording of the call and she sounded calm AF. She told me she was screaming on the inside the entire time. Student paramedic here. Had a call being general broadcasted over radio when I was chilling in base with my mentor. We were on a 2-man car ambulance. Operator who was broadcasting said something along the lines of, "Female, reportedly unconscious. Police on scene. Major trauma. Pause. CPR in progress. Confirmed arrest by police on scene." My mentor looks at me. We're off in 30 minutes at the end of a night shift, but we'd go anyway. We're around the corner. Make it there in no time at all. There's police everywhere. At least 7 squad cars. I'm nervous as heck and so is my mentor. As we approach the house, a man emerges, handcuffed by police. He looks content enough and smiles at us as we walk by. Police shout for us to hurry. We run over with equipment to front door and are met with one of the worst scenes I've ever seen and will always be there in my mind. There's a woman lying on the ground, with the left side of her head caved in. Blood absolutely all over the place and brain matter scattered around the floor too. Police are doing CPR. We stop them when we see the patient has signs of pooling and rigor mortis. I'm literally sweating and on the verge of tears. This is not how I wanted my shift to end. Then, we hear from behind us more police in the house and the sounds of children. 2 kids are escorted out of a bedroom behind us with their eyes covered and one of them asks, "What's going on? Where's mommy?" My heart melted. I've never been exactly traumatized by a job, but those kids being shielded from what just happened to their mother will stick with me forever. I bring equipment back to the ambulance as my mentor starts to do paperwork and we wait for someone to move the body. Social services arrive and take the kids, blissfully unaware of what's just happened. Was off 3 hours late after all the paperwork and interviewing from police. Good job, but man has it left its mark on me. I was a dispatcher for a residential alarm company similar to ADT. I would call people when their alarm was tripped and ask them if they were okay. One day I received a signal from a resident from a glass break sensor on a window in the bathroom. When I called, the lady was laughing so hard she could barely give me her safety password. Turns out she was cleaning her bathroom and when she bent over she farted so hard and loud it set off the sensor on the bathroom window. Nice to read a happy memory on here. Sounds like something my mom would do. Older lady, I want to say maybe early 70s, calls in with a sort of polite urgency in her voice. Tells me she thinks she's having a stroke. Tells me she has her grandchild at the house with her. Asks me to call her daughter to come get the child. By the time she's done giving me the phone number, there's just a very slight slur in her speech. By the time Ems got there, probably no more than 5 minutes or so, I couldn't understand a thing she was saying. Fascinating, disturbing, and profoundly sad hearing someone stroke out on the phone as they're talking to you. Had someone call saying a man had been killed by a goat. Turns out goat is what they also call the machine that picks oranges off of trees. Miscommunication can be horrifying. I just googled orange goat to see what this machine looked like, and all the results were orange goats. Not entirely sure how I didn't foresee that. I'll go with a lighter one. I once had an elderly woman complain that gang members tagged her shed. She also said she didn't want a black deputy. This is the South. The black deputy arrived and found that it wasn't spray paint, but that her shed was so dirty that slugs had eaten paths in the filth that created patterns. The McSlug gang strike again. A woman masturbating on the phone. The first time she called she sounded normal at first. Asked for an officer that never worked here. General conversation about this officer while she progressively got more extreme with her moaning. I eventually, and gracefully, ended the conversation. It was a wild time. I still remember her name and voice. The second and third times she called I asked if it was her and she hung up right away. Why are you like this, Ms. Roberts? What is your end game? That's some weird butt fetish. Not 911, but telenursing. People called me plenty when it should have been 911. Grandma calls me about her 16-year-old, 40-week pregnant granddaughter. GM. Hey, my grandbaby is pregnant and she just went to pee and said the cord is hanging out. Is that normal? Me. No, not even a little bit. I've been a 911 dispatcher for 11 years in a medium-sized center. Population 180,000. We have more than our share of crazy calls, but there are only a few calls that have stuck with me. For me, the ones that I can't get rid of aren't even close to being the craziest or most brutal. 7-8 years ago I took a 911 call from a man who came home to find his adult sister had been raped and beaten. The suspect had wrapped a telephone cord around her neck, then tried to push her through the window of the apartment. He was understandably very distraught. She was still alive and was able to talk to me. She had not been blindfolded and I was certain I could get a description of the person who had done this to her. She answered all of my other questions but absolutely refused to give me any info on the suspect. I later found out that the reason was self-preservation. The person who did it was the brother who called 911 for help. He was so believable it really messed with my head. I also felt horrible that I had continued pressing her for info with the person who hurt her was right there and that I could have potentially put her in more danger without realizing. I have a few. I took a call from a man whose 1-year-old daughter fell in the pool while unattended. At the time of the call she was not breathing, unresponsive, and had no pulse. My partner dispatched out fire and EMS while I was on the phone. Got the child's mother to start CPR. Fortunately she was certified and didn't require very much instruction at all. Just had to tell her to count her compressions out loud so I could keep up. Before first responders arrived, the baby starts breathing again. I believe she sustained some brain injury but nothing life-threatening. Had to go take a walk around the block after that one. Please, 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 if you aren't CPR certified, get certified. It very well may have been the difference between that child living and dying. On a lighter note, I also had a guy call in claiming he was having a heart attack. None of the info I got from this guy indicated he was even remotely at risk for one. Mid-20s male, average weight, no history of heart problems, or any other medical history for that matter. Turns out he had smoked some particularly strong pot about 30 minutes prior to calling. Absolutely nothing wrong with him other than he was stone stupid. We got a pretty good laugh out of that one. I also took a call from a kid who was about 10 years old who thought it would be funny to prank call 911. He started off by saying there was a fire. I could hear him giggling in the background. Followed that up with meowing at me over the phone. Managed to get a good location off the call and got his address. Read the address to him and asked if that's where he lives. Click. Alright. Got you now, you little crap. Had a deputy go out to the house as is our policy and he explained the situation to the parents. Deputy told me later the kid got the butt chewing of a lifetime. Super gratifying. Out of all these horror stories on this thread, the heart attack stoner was a great comedic relief. A young man 23 years old called and told me he was going to commit suicide. He was my first call of my shift that day, very early in the morning. He planned to set his car on fire with himself inside. He was upset and crying but he apologized to me. He said he was sorry I picked up the phone and he was sorry for how this was going to affect me. He hung up on me and the second time I was speaking to him I could hear liquid splashing in the background. He ended hanging up again and I never got him back. He did end up setting the on fire and it was fully engulfed by the time anyone got there. I'll never forget his name or voice and I simply hope I showed him kindness and compassion in his last moments. Jesus Christ. I hope you're okay after having to take that call. You did all you could. Clearly he didn't want to be stopped. You sound like a good soul. Answered to the sounds of a couple of women absolutely screaming and wailing. I'm sure anyone that has done the job long enough knows the type of scream I mean. That blood-curdling scream of someone in genuine anguish. Knew something was up and got police and ambulance on the way. trying to get them on the phone to get details, and a boy of no more than 5 years old comes on the phone and says my daddy is swinging from the roof and his eyes are open and staring. He had hung himself while his family were out doing their shopping. Yikes. That is terrible for the family and the kids, but there is not much that is more straightforward than a child caller. This one still bothers me because it's so fresh and our community is hurting from it as well. Took a call from a hysterical woman advising me of a rollover crash that happened near her house. She lives near the top of a blind hill that people like to jump, like catching that butterfly feeling in your stomach, although you can get air in the right vehicle. She tells me that a girl is laying on the ground about 30 feet or so from the vehicle. When asked if the girl is alive, she says, "Oh yes, honey, she's wiggling around on the ground. My daughter is a nurse. She's checking on her now." Awesome. We hardly ever are lucky enough to have a trained professional on scene before a med unit can get there. But then she tells me her daughter is starting CPR. To be honest, that didn't surprise me. My caller was getting hysterical again and we already had first responders on the way, so I started asking more questions about the scene. Her daughter breaks CPR to get on the phone with me, tells me she can do compressions only, that the girl's jaw is completely gone. A bit stunned, I tell her to continue compressions. But rather than getting put back on with the original caller, I hear the scared voice of a teenage girl, the driver. Is my friend going to be okay? I can't find anything to say for a moment. Finally, after what seemed to be too long, I say they're doing CPR, dear, and we have help on the way. Are you and the other passenger okay? We're fine. Just please tell me she's okay. The girl on the ground was confirmed DOA. She had been laying down in the back seat without her seatbelt on because she had a headache. She was 15. For me, the worst ones are always the calls you can relate to on a personal level. I took a call last month from a father who discovered his son with a bag over his head and a note next to his body. I've taken a ton of suicide calls, but this one was particularly difficult for me because the son was my age, and the way the father pleaded with his son was almost exactly the same way I've imagined my dad if I were to ever do the same. I've had the same "come on, buddy, don't do this to me" running in my head at least 2-3 times a day since. Also, not technically a call but my first shift on my own. I dispatched the deputy I did my ride along with to a domestic that he ended up being shot and killed at. Hearing his blood gurgled shots fired scream on the radio won't be something I'll ever forget. Dang. Thank you for everything you do. Well, my buddy is a fireman and dispatch had just alerted them of a man having chest pains. They get to the guy's house, and as soon as they open the door, the dude's dog runs outside. The dude shouts, "You let my dog out, go get my dog, please." So my buddy immediately starts chasing the dog. He catches the dog, comes back to the house, and when he walks in the door he sees that the man having chest pains had actually shot a hole in his chest while cleaning his gun. Old dude shoots himself in the chest, tells 911 it's chest pains, and when help arrives, he makes them go chase his dog down before tending to his own life-threatening wound. Biggest WTF of my buddy's career. Technically correct, his chest did hurt. A woman complaining of spiders in her vagina. In college, I worked as an EMT in a major city. Not the craziest call I ever had, but one of the wackiest callouts we ever got was to respond to a woman complaining of spiders in her vagina. I'll never forget pulling up to this major intersection where, sure enough, there's this old lady lying on the sidewalk with her pants off and legs spread up in the air. Turns out it was this transient lady in her 70s who had been having some wild hallucinations. We still had to check for spiders. I have shared this before, but one that sticks with me is a 14-year-old girl that calls the police for a disturbance. Officers show up and everything seems average. Parents advise the reporting party is upset because she isn't allowed to go out with her boyfriend. Officers are getting ready to leave after being there for 40 minutes, but something seems off to them. The two officers take the 14-year-old outside and near their patrol units to speak to her. While they are walking outside, the girl's mother, stepfather and two sisters go and stand on the porch to see if they can see what is going on. They are unable to hear due to their officers and girl being on the other side of the street. It was then when the stepfather started pacing and went inside. The girl breaks down and tells the officers that her stepdad has been sexually assaulting her for years and he didn't want her to go see her boyfriend because he was jealous. The officers look up and at that moment they see the stepfather shoot the mother in the back of the head. He proceeds to shoot the reporting party's older sister in the chest and her younger sister in the leg as they started running away. One officer returns fire while the other is shielding the reporting party. The stepfather runs inside and barricades himself. The reporting party tells the officer that her two brothers are inside with the stepfather. Backup arrives and surround the home. The officers make forced entry after they hear gunfire from inside. They storm the residence and find the stepfather has shot himself in the head with his two biological sons in the same room. The mother died instantly. The older sister died instantly. The younger sister was hospitalized. I don't know if she made it. Just know she was flown to a hospital miles away. This 14-year-old lost her family. Later the investigators were taking her statement and her only reply was, "Last time I tried to tell someone the truth I lost my family. Doesn't matter what I say. I'm alone now." It took hours to get in contact with the family. Eventuality we were able to get in touch with her grandparents and she left with them. I think about this kid a lot and hope she is okay. 112 dispatcher amongst other things. My job is actually a fireman, but due to the structure of the fire department where I live we are also taking calls. Anyway, got a call once from a lady who wanted assistance because she fell on the floor, lived alone and had trouble standing up. Pretty common, so I sent a crew out there. They come back and they tell me she was kind of disappointed. This call kept happening for the next few days till we understood what was going on. She had a crush on one of my colleagues and she just wanted him to visit her. When she finally put together when his shift was working, they only had her calls ever since. I've joked with my friends about doing this because we had some really cute local firefighters in DC, but we would never actually do it. Kind of impressed with her commitment. I've left the job now for pastures new, but story time. Woman of 90 years old calls up and says she's having a spot of trouble. She's struggling to work the phone and tells me she basically had a leg ulcer which has popped and that she's on blood thinners, so there's a lot of blood coming out. I get an ambulance out immediately to her, but midway through the call it goes silent, and I hear a big gulp thud on the floor. After this, I try my best to basically shout down the phone after her to get her attention. All I can hear is very heavy breathing but no reply. This continues for a couple of minutes before I hear banging on the other end of the line and a voice faintly shouting the lady's name. I keep trying to rouse her myself but I am unsuccessful. I hear the window break and a couple of voices approaching. They reach her and thankfully I hear her very faint voice respond. Normally we don't find out what happens, but in this case I actually received a letter and chocolates from the lady who sent it in and said that she could hear me the whole time and felt reassured that help was coming, but she didn't have the strength to reply. For what was a really crappy job at the time, getting that made the next few months really easy. Oh my goodness, that really is. I can't think of the word, but I'm glad everything turned out good and wholesome. I worked for a dispatch company very similar to Life Alert. An older lady in her 90s thought someone was intruding on her property and called the cops. She had severe dementia though and forgot she had called the cops, so when they rang her door she thought they were the intruders. So she hit her wrist button to get in contact with us. Then she got out her gun. I then called the police, while also talking to her, and literally on the recording you could hear her taking shots at the police officers on scene, while they freaked out while I got my supervisor ASAP tried to talk her down. The police and I eventually got her to calm down and stop firing, but apparently she had missed a police officer by just 6 inches. Family had to get involved and she ended up moving to a nursing home shortly after. Dementia sucks. Dementia with a gun. That was never going to end well. Can't believe she didn't have to surrender the gun when she was diagnosed. The one that always sticks with me was the time I had to tell a father how to cut his 15-year-old son down after he had hung himself. He was actively reciting reasons why he may have been a bad parent while doing it. I'll remember that until the day I die. I once attended a very similar situation. A father had just cut down his daughter when I arrived on scene. She was 24, the same age as myself at the time, and in the early stages of pregnancy. I will never Ever forget that day? It's been nearly 3 years and I can still get a bit upset thinking about it. I know how you feel and it freaking sucks, mate. I've been a police dispatcher for a little over 2 years. The call I'll never forget is the first suicide caller I got. It was around 11:30 p.m. and this girl calls 911. She must have been 19-20 years old. All she says is that she is just calling to let me know where to find her body. I ask her where she's at, an address, intersection, anything. She tells me she's old enough to know that I already have her location, so she doesn't need to give it to me. That's not true. All I have is the location of the cell tower her cell phone is pinging off of. No way I can find her. I plead with her a bit, and she finally gives me an address. Then, I ask her how she's planning to do it. I'm trying to keep her on the line as long as possible so she doesn't actually hurt herself, but she doesn't answer me anymore. I decide to get the paramedics on the line so we can get police and fire rolling to her location. While I'm connecting to the fire department, I hear this crash and a choking sound. I don't know what she did, but my heart drops. I'm thinking she killed herself with me on the line. I give the address to FD and I have PD on the way. I'm listening on the radio while I'm trying to get this girl to talk to me again when I hear the officers ask to verify the address. They don't see a house there. Frick. I finally get this girl to come back on the phone and she's crying hysterically. I ask her what happened and she tells me she was in the bathroom and tried to hang herself. She was too heavy and the shower curtain bar bent. I'm a bit relieved because she's not dead, but she's still in danger. I asked her to give me the address again and even though she's on the same street, her address is further south. Crap, I have to get to officers and M's that are closer to go. I start talking to her and so far so good. Officers get there, but they can't find her. I'm freaking out because I'm thinking she gave me the wrong address again, and she stops talking to me again. Just an open line. I don't know what to do. Silence. I attempt hanging up and calling her. No answer. I'm thinking I fricked up. I ask my supervisor if there is anything else I can do, and they reassure me and tell me I did all I could. I listen to the police radio for a bit and see that the officers managed to get into the house and found the girl and she was being transported to the hospital. It was a huge weight off my shoulders. I took a break for a few minutes to collect my thoughts and went back to answering more calls. We were busy. Oh my god. Frick, thank god for flimsy shower curtains. This one had my heart racing. I used to work for 111, which is the UK's non-emergency line, but at least a third of the calls we would take would be emergency calls, or potentially emergency calls, heart attacks, strokes, etc. I remember a lot of emergency calls, suicidal patients, patients who had only just stopped breathing and the people with them refused to do CPR. But the one that hit me hardest was a miscarriage. I had a young single woman call late at night screaming in agony, in absolute panic for her baby, completely unable to move to open the door to let the emergency services in. Fortunately, we were able to pass the dispatch details of any emergency call directly to 999 even though we had to stay on the line with the patient. And I remember having to sit there listening to this poor woman have a horrifically painful miscarriage and the absolute distress she was in at losing her baby whilst she was all alone with no family to call on. And I felt completely helpless. All I could do was stay on the line with her until her help was on the way. My brother-in-law is a 999 operator in the UK, and they also take calls on the non-emergency number, which is 101. He tells me about the more light-hearted calls and one of them always makes me smile when I remember it. Call comes through on 101 and all he can hear is some faint muttering and a TV in the background. He's a bit worried cause it's potentially someone who has collapsed, managed to dial a number, but isn't able to talk. He's trying to get a response when suddenly an old guy starts talking to him, obviously very confused as to why there's someone on the end of the phone. Turns out the old guy had thought his phone was his TV remote and he was just trying to watch the golf on BBC, which just so happens to be channel 101. He was very apologetic when my brother-in-law explained what he'd done. That's so sweet. I'm seeing a lot of serious stories on here. The job isn't always like that. I'm a police call handler in the UK. Someone once called 999 because a pigeon was standing in the road and she was worried it would be run over. Could not understand why that didn't merit an emergency response. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.